problem was, and thereby this idea that why is all this good work being done by amazing people not reaching everybody? And it's not like the numbers are small, the number of NGOs working in the country, the number of people working in the social sector, the number of really good people, and the passion and commitment with which they work. And that's where this whole thing started off, in my mind. And there were two questions that one started off with. And the first question was this idea that, whatever I saw, I got a feeling you figured out the more difficult problem, how to work with, what is the pedagogy to teach girls from marginal backgrounds in a tribal village of Rajasthan, but you don't know how to manage people or processes or technology or what for me was like management and was like day-to-day stuff. And you were collapsing because of that and you were not able to reach anywhere. So this first question was that, oh my God, if only we could bring management, and I'll talk a little bit about that management in a bit. We could solve so many of these problems and thereby make the work reach far more people and have an impact in far larger scale. But the second question was the more tricky one. And I was fortunate to be in a place like Azim Premji Foundation with like amazing people working around me who were able to point me and steer me, whenever I went off in a wrong direction. And the second question was this management that intuitively came to me as a business manager, having done that for a quarter of a century, uh, didn't seem to work in this space. Actually, I would push it further and say not only it didn't work in the space, it could be dangerous in this space. If some of those choices that came to me from a very managerial mindset, and I call it the techno managerial mindset, without the value system, without the humaneness of what is to be done, without the participatory aspects of work, and so on and so forth, one could be doing severe damage, forget doing good. So these two questions of management is required, but this management that I seem to know doesn't work here. So, how does this whole thing work? That's when one got into this whole space of trying to understand. And then one looked at the history of management. If you look at the history of management, and I'll talk about the master's program, management itself, historically can go back. For example, public administration goes back to the Greeks and the Romans, and even in India, the Arthashastra and all that. But roughly the first master's program in public administration, and I call public administration as management for the state. And that goes back to 1880 when Woodrow Wilson introduced the first master's program in public administration. The MBA program is roughly 1900, where Harvard and Wharton introduced the idea of a master's in business administration. And that was rooted in the Industrial Revolution. So in the Industrial Revolution, suddenly humankind figured out how to produce goods in very large quantities. And then they needed to figure out how to manage the inventory, the cash flow, the distribution, the logistics, and it went on and on. And you may not know this, but management was actually created by engineers, and it was created as part of the fag end of the industrial revolution to be able to make that industrial ability reach far and wide, and that's why I call it very techno managerial, and you'll see the impact of that in everything that we do. Even today, when I look, for example, let's say at the schooling system in our country, I mean, honestly, it feels like a shop floor. You put kids on the first table, a year later you move them to the second table and the third table. In between you reject a few because they don't meet. It seems like a shop, and it just doesn't seem to be rooted in how the child learns, how the child develops, how different people have different aspirations, how different contexts are different. It's a very industrial way of running, so everything is really evolving from there. And thereby you realize why the business management is also very rooted in those principles of standardizing or efficiency parameters. And those are not very human in nature. I mean, I talk about two children I have, and I can't even standardize how those two children study. One wants to blast the music, one wants silence. One wants to study in the morning, one wants to study in the night. One likes to study visually, one likes to study by. So, that's human. Human nature is very rich, is very complex, is very varied in its structure. So clearly, this type of management doesn't seem to work at all. And then thereafter, of course, somewhere when the USSR collapsed, capitalism also kicked into that whole management. So if you go back to early days of management, I remember my own first class taught by famous professor Labdi Bhandari, who said that you can't be in the business of making money. Because if you're in the business of making money, then you'll do a lot of wrong things. You must be in the business of solving somebody's need. And that can be a rich man's need, poor man's need, it doesn't matter. But you're in the business of solving a problem, solving a need, meeting somebody's, whatever. Uh, Somewhere along the way, by the time halfway through my career, by the time I'd worked for about 15 years, everything moved to shareholder value. So all our incentive structures, everything was driven by shareholder value. It was money making. Business was all about making money for your shareholders, creating value in the terms of money. So these are the drivers of management, and clearly that didn't seem to work over here. And but having said that, if you look at the influence of management on business or the state, states today, of course, you have whether it is agencies that cut across 200 countries, or trans-Pacific, transatlantic, whatever organizations. It's amazing what public administration does. But let's take the case of business, right? Businesses today have become humongous. Every year, the number of businesses that are larger than number of countries is a number that is increasing every year. Today, you have businesses that reach 2 billion, 3 billion people, going across 200 countries. My own bank was in 180 countries. So it's amazing how that happens. That happens because you have the ability to manage. And that management is about managing people, managing processes, managing money, managing technology, managing network, managing partnerships, managing regulators, etc., etc. So what is management? The unfortunate thing that's happened in the social sector is we have in the past thrown the baby with the bathwater. And that's why I gave the topic of my talk also in terms of, questioning what do you mean management for the development state, right? Because people said it's the management people who created all the problems in the world. Now, don't tell me that same management is going to come and solve those problems. That was the narrative of the social sector, and they just threw the baby with the bathwater. And I have gone to so much lengths to explain. No, I'm not talking about business management. I am talking about management, and by management I mean the ability to do things at scale, large number of people, large sums of money, large processes, etc., etc., etc. Take the verb management and not the noun, which is business management as the. Unfortunately, business management has been so sort of, it's engulfed all of us. So even words today are immediately associated with business management. The moment you say management, it means business management. And even words like impact. The moment you say impact, the word, immediately goes into some return on investment type fund. So that way, the management principles have played a significant role in defining how we think, how society is, thereby trying to get to explain to people that I am talking about a management which is very different, was a huge need. And of course, if you think about it very simply, right, and I think of society as driven by three pillars. So there is the state, there is the markets, and there is civil society. And the state has a management for itself, which is called public administration. Business has management for itself, which is called business management. And by the way, if you ask them, do you think the MBA ideas can be used to run the government? Of course not. And does the business world think that the public administration system that is used to run state and public systems can be used to run the private sector and the markets? No. So then why this question that social sector organizations can be run by one of them? So clearly this is a gap. So while a lot of work has happened in the management of business, management of state, this has been a completely left behind. What has happened is, if you think about it, pre-independence India was very significantly a civil society country. The most powerful forces that influenced this country was civil society. The freedom movement was a civil society. Since independence, and with all the growth and all the opportunities that have been created, decade after decade, civil society has been pushed to the margin. Civil society today doesn't have a seat on the table. And if you think about it, right, how many organizations can you name in civil society organizations that work across the country or have an influence across? You'll struggle to go beyond 10. If I ask a fifth standard boy to tell me how many businesses that you can name that are worldwide, they'll rattle it off: Facebook, Google, Hyatt, God knows what, etc. It's crazy. And if you take India, and I'll give you one data point, Unilever is the biggest consumer goods company in this country. It reaches the largest number of people. It reaches 720 million people. 720 million people are using products of Unilever. If you take the social sector, there's no great data, but arguably CARE would be one of the largest organizations which reaches a lot of people in a direct sense of the word. And, they might be reaching about, I don't know, 38, 39, 40 million. Not even on the charts. And here you're trying to solve problems which are faced by 500, 600 million and so on and so. So you really need to figure out how do we solve this. And for me, development management is really about how do you make social purpose organizations be able to operate at a scale which can make a difference to large numbers of people in a sustained way. I see sustained way because there's a lot of work we do in the civil society that is very short term. And I use the story of Kalahandi because I spent 9 years of my life in Orissa. There was a point in time where children were dying of starvation in Kalahandi. Then the media caught it, and then everybody went down there. And a few years later, it was announced that there are no more hungry children in Kalahandi. Not very long ago, again, I was visiting somewhere there, and again I was inquiring about this. Again, have children dying of starvation. Dying of starvation is, I mean, I can't even imagine that in our civilized society we could have something happening like that. But that's that ability to do things that will remain, which is sustained and at scale. So sustained impact at scale is what for me is development management. I'll then go into actually how did we go about in this work that we did, and the initial phase we went around the world. It must have been figured out somewhere. So let's go find out where it's been done, and we'll bring it to India. So my wife and I were dropping our son off in college, so we went to all the top colleges. So we started with the West Coast. We went to Stanford. We went to Berkeley. Then we went to Harvard. A lot of places. I've spoken to people at LSC, at Asian Institute of Management, at HEC, at SOAS, at INSEAD, all over the place. And what we found is there were three schools of thought. The first is a business school that thinks that it can solve the management needs of the social. So Harvard as a school of social enterprise, Haas will send all its students off to solve social sector problems, etc. And they probably do something also. Not that like it doesn't work at all, but in the short term it might work, may not work in the long term. But anyway, that's one idea of business management. So you will find some of the not-for-profit management offered in business. The second school of thought is public policy. So public policy schools like London School of Economics has a program called not-for-profit management. But a lot of that text and curriculum, if you see, will be rooted in the idea that most social problems can and only will be solved at the public system levels, macroeconomic level. And thereby the courses are around money flows and north-south movements and trade and so on and so forth. The third is, there are social work schools which do what I said earlier, which is keep these management guys away. It's a necessary evil. We need to do some fundraising and some technology. Let's teach our social workers that we don't need these management. And this is where it was. And then one studied the journey in India. Uncle Mr. Raja's work and, what some of you who have done, that's some work that's happened in this country in development management. And that goes back maybe 25, 30 years, maybe even before that. We went and spent a whole week at IRMA, where we had Professor Tushar Shah, who used to be the director. He was a member of Varghese Kurian's original team that had designed, that had set up IRMA and the curriculum and all that to understand what was done there. We went to Madurai, where there is a Tata Dhan Foundation running for the last 17 years. Then there are programs there's a Development Management Institute in Patna, which we went and saw. It was set up by Xavier's Institute has a rural management program. Rural management is now available in a few more places. So IRMA among all these places, in some senses, and the work that all of you did in Bombay, has been an attempt at figuring out what is the management that's required in the social purpose organization. And starting from saying that the business management principles don't work on an as is where is basis. It needs to be read just once. I'm sorry. We went and studied all that. And one of the things we were told at IRMA by Professor Tushar Shah is that it's not enough if you produce a course on development management. please go tell organizations in the sector that they need development management. Otherwise, you'll produce students and they won't be accepted anywhere. So that is a very important insight that was given to us. Because he said INMA produced students, and about 25% of the first batch went to join Amul, and they were welcome at Amul because it was created on the basis of the other 75% people wondered what is this management language you're talking about? I mean, we need people in watershed and animal husbandry and cooperatives and so on and so forth. Sorry, no cooperatives, in other types of work. What is this management thing that you're talking about? And 90% of that lot left their job within 1 year. Over the years, of course, IRMA has completely lost the plot because somewhere they became part of the common admission test for IIMs. So today, an IRMA would graduate about, I would say, 250 students. 25 students go into the sector, 225 going to the corporate. So it's completely lost the plot. If your students are not going to do what you set them to do, then the whole purpose is completely defeated. So we were very clearly told that whatever you do, you need to do it in a manner in which it works on the whole ecosystem. You need to work on students, you need to work on program, you need to work on research, you need to work with organizations, you need to work with regulators, and so on. So that's really, our sort of a journey in terms of where we decided to go. And where once we started in that space, we started asking questions of what is management for the social sector and how is that sort of different? And I'll give you some thoughts, and this is a thing that we're learning and it's evolving. And I'll give you some characteristics which we believe differentiate management in the development sector from, let's say, the business. So from the first day I graduated out of IIM Ahmedabad, I was competing. I was competing for customers, for market share, for share of wallet, for repeat purchases. And it was competition. And my incentives were based on that. My promotions were based on that. My bonuses were based on that. In the social sector, management has to be based on the principles of collaboration. Because really, it can't work in competition. And the sad story in India is there are so many organizations, let's take, school education, who are working on the same thing. And that's so much money and energy that gets wasted. If only they would have collaborated, the child who's suffering or who's waiting for the, better education would have benefited so much more. So it's very competitive. You'll be amazed how much the NGOs compete with each other. Yeah, I mean, there are funding challenges, but this is way more than that. The principle itself is forgotten. The second is in business, everything was about the secret sauce. If I knew how to make, a sweet aerated drink, and that recipe was not known anywhere else in the world, then I could sell, whatever it is, cola or Pepsi in so many countries and billions of bottles and so on and so forth. Similarly, whether it's an iPod, whether it's anything else. In the social sector, it can't be about the secret that only the NGO knows. It has to be something which is an open secret, which is made available because only then you will have genuine impact and scale. So then how do you create management frameworks, incentives, cultures, reward systems, hiring practices, motivation theories, etc. In a environment where that is the idea, where you're not driving, what is very nicely called core competencies or, your own sort of secret strengths that nobody else is able to. The third is this whole space of the agency of the customer. In the business world, I always did business where I offered something to the customer where the customer could not do it herself or would prefer not to do it. Whereas here, I have to believe that the person should be able to do it themselves. There is no work that will be sustainable unless and until the community is able to own it and adopt it eventually. And thereby the whole idea of how you work is very different. In one instance, I'm going to tell you that you can't do it and why you should buy it from me. Here, I'm going to tell you should not buy it from me, you should do it yourself. But of course, there's a process of facilitating and supporting and exposing them to opportunities. Another idea is this idea of inclusiveness. I mean, in the world of business, I focus on my share, my target segment. Word that's very popular is target segment. In the world of development, it can't be about target segment. Has to be about inclusiveness. It has to be about every section of society being involved in the whole process. The whole idea of the human development approach, which UNDP has written, books and books on, which is this idea of how do you do work that is creating opportunities, creating the ability to participate in those opportunities, and taking that whole principle of social justice to another level. Management that is driven by universal human values, of fairness, of dignity, of all these values that are so important for a flourishing society are far more important in a development management. And the last one is, of course, this idea of shared aspiration. In the world of business, it's about the stakeholders' aspiration. In the development space, it's about a shared aspirations of a diverse community that's coming together. And you can't solve one problem and forget everything else, because that is a challenge. You'll solve one problem and cause five other problems downstream. I mean, and then there are so many examples. Even the biggest midday meal program in this country, while of course it's an amazing piece of work and they're sending food, one could put, throw a question and say, but have you disenfranchised the villages? The better model have been empowering the villages to produce their own midday meals, for example, right? I'm not there are values, but there are different ways of thinking of some of these questions. So just coming to what ISDM is trying to do, ISDM is trying to work on the entire ecosystem. We're saying that this problem cannot be solved unless you work on the entire ecosystem. So you need to produce knowledge, you need to produce talent, you need to build capacity in this segment, you need to work with regulators in the government, you need to work with the markets to understand how it can all work. And no social problem is going to be solved without the involvement of the state, the markets, and civil society. There's a huge trust deficit that's been created across these three over the years, and one needs to start producing, cadre that starts understanding how do markets work, how do the state work, and then engaging with them and finding solutions to a lot of these problems. So we are working on the entire ecosystem, and we're going beyond it because we're also, challenging some of the methods and frameworks in higher education. Higher education, if you ask me, has become the most stuck up and stayed, sort of a space in the country and maybe even in the world. And across the world, there's a debate on, how should higher education be approached. So we've tried a lot of things. We've tried a lot of fundamental principles of andragogy and adult learning, and where we've taken away grade systems and you say it's your learning contract. You're spending a year and coming here. It's for you to figure out how do you want to run. The way we run our organization, we say that we don't have a leave policy. You can take as much leave as you want. Because why should everyone have only 30 days of? Somebody may need 40 this year. Somebody else needs only 20 this year. We have, we also try and create a role model institution for ourselves. But more importantly, what we've realized is that higher education institutions have the ability to inspire society and change the way people think. And in our own country, if you look at, let's say, National Law School in Bangalore, right? Before that, law was not a very aspirational, career choice for, children after the 12th standard. National Law School came, created a 5-year integrated program, created this, really nice campus in Bangalore. Today, it's among the top 3, top 5 choices of students. It's not that the courts in our country have changed, not that the legal process has changed. There are still 3 crore cases pending in the country. It still takes an average of 10 years for a case to get resolved in our country. But law has become very aspirational. The institutions have that ability. And you can take other institutions, National Institute of Design in this country. I mean, why would design? There are so many design schools in this country. You wonder why would a developing country have so many designs? Well, that's what NIT did. I mean, I went to an IIT. I didn't go to an IIT because engineering was a passion. It was a very cool place to go. It was a very inspiring institution to go to. The people who came there, the campus that was there, the kind of things that they did over there. Those are the kind of things. So we said you need to create iconic institutions in the development sector. And in our case, of course, we said that we will build a world-class iconic institution for development management. And initially people asked me, why don't you just go to IIM Ahmedabad and, put it up there because, you're an alumni of IIM Ahmedabad. I said, no, I don't want to do that because you'll become a poor cousin of the MBA program or you'll become a specialization of business management. And we're trying to break that. We want to make the point that this is to be thought through very differently. This has to be built grounds up. Of course, you will learn from every other discipline, but you have to build and put the spotlights on development management. Only then will it become an aspirational career choice. Only then will it get mainstream. And by mainstream, of course, I mean, students are going to study, organizations are hiring, parents think it's a cool thing to, send their students to go and do that. And then the next thing is about, in this whole higher education space, one of the things that we felt, and it was an opportunity in many ways, in the past, higher education institutions were either built by the old kings and then the government, or then, large business groups, whether it is the in Canada or whatever. With Ashoka, we saw the coming of a bunch of fairly rich people, but coming together, and some 200-300 of them eventually have got together and have built this. We've taken it to another level of actually trying to even democratize it completely and say, can people like myself, who's not from these families or anything like that, think and even believe that they can build an institution in the country and possibly for the world and just bring people. So we use the idea of collective wisdom and collective plan. We started by saying we won't take more than 10,000 rupees from anyone and all that. But that was too much of a stretch. So over time, we've started bringing people together. And like Raja said, we seem to be getting immense support. So whether it's the Ford Foundation, the Umedia Foundation, Citibank, HSBC, and people like Ashish, Pavan, Chandra, Sanjeev, Vikchan. So money is not an issue at all, is what I'm realizing in this country. If you have a really good idea, you're passionate about it, you're willing to make a difference, I think it can happen. So in many ways, we're trying to see, and since then, we've actually inspired many institutions. Now there is a Indian School of Public Policy that's been set up by a group of people like myself. There is an Indian School of Democracy, somebody else set up. There's somebody else who wants to set up, because the idea of bringing toy to study an Indian Institute of Play. Fascinating how you then create a whole um, sort of an ecosystem of such institutions which are addressing social issues. So we call it collective wisdom and collective philanthropy. So none of us at ISDM are sitting there thinking we are these experts who know all the answers and we are these ultimate brains. No, we're the ones who are facilitating a process of collaboration, bringing together the best minds to talk to them, to document it, and in the process we've been building knowledge. So we must have spoken to over 1,000 people who are involved in many different ways with us. We have people from, I mean, the dean of Harvard Business School, like Srikant Datar, is one of our advisors. Two, grassroots organizations, people working on the grassroots, like let's say a P. Sainath is involved. So it's a range of people that we've been able to involve, and that coming together of the practitioner and the academic. That's the intersection at where knowledge is getting created for development. That's been our sort of idea and what we want to do. So today, in terms of where we have reached, like I said, we've got a lot of really good minds involved. We've got a good team in place. We've been working across three strategic pillars: teaching, which is talent; knowledge. So we are setting up a global knowledge hub. A global knowledge hub will have centers of excellence which work on uh, creating, curating, and disseminating knowledge to influence the way we lead and manage organizations. I'll give you an example of the center of excellence we've just got funded for. So we are setting up a center of excellence on philanthropy social justice. How should philanthropy work? So can we produce knowledge frameworks, knowledge assets, papers, podcasts, what have you on what how should philanthropy be approached? Today in this country, if somebody suddenly makes $100 million, they will have no idea where to start. Second center of excellence we are setting up, which Citibank is funding us, is a center of excellence on data sciences and artificial intelligence for social. How do you bring things like data sciences, big data, which is really what does Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these guys do? These are all large data and technology companies. But while they're using data to build businesses and figure out what book to recommend you, which ad to recommend you, can I use the same to figure out how to improve school education in the governments? Can we imagine how to respond to a COVID kind of a situation? So that idea. And the third one we're working on is finance. Finance is one space the social sector is really, really weak at. How do we imagine new innovative social finance models? We are talking today about a social stock exchange in this country. There are some pay for performance models that have started. There are some development bonds that have. But how do we create a whole array or a knowledge of finance so that more money can come into the system and connecting it to impact? So what does impact mean? So innovative social finance and impact. So anyway, that's on the knowledge space. And the third is the space of working on building capacity of individuals and organizations. So one of the things we want to do is, while our students are going in at the junior level, we need to also get the CEOs to change their mindset. So can you do a one-year program for the CEOs? We are looking at doing what we are calling nation building programs, which is identifying segments that have a disproportionate influence in society and engaging with them. So one of the programs we want to start is Women on Board. We believe that if there are more women in senior positions, There'll be a far more intersectional ways of working on social problems. And that's the only way to work on. We're thinking of working with all collectors in this country. We're thinking of working with young philanthropists who will, go on. We're thinking of working with social entrepreneurs. That's become a new thing. A lot of youngsters want to start businesses that can solve social issues and so on. So different segments like that. And the last is to figure out how do we support the rank and file in organizations, because a lot of people just drift into the social sector from a passion in their heart. They rarely come in there as professional managers or the ability to manage processes, programs, etc. So can we produce a series of Khan Academy type videos which just help the rank and file and try and do that in the vernacular? Because so many organizations are working in the languages in the different parts of the country. Having a management program that's only in English is never going to reach all these people. So how do we do that? That's another area that we've been working on. And what does success really mean? And I'll just take 2 minutes to talk about that. Is if we can mainstream development management. If an idea of masters in development management becomes common parlance like an MBA is, and is aspirational for bright youngsters to want to go and social purpose organizations recognize that that's a cadre you will need, like you have a cadre of MBAs in the world of business. So really, if we can do uh, to the social sector what the MBAs did to the world of business, I think we would have really, gone in the direction what we would define as success. And the eventual measure is really are the number of social sector organizations having impact at great sales significantly more than they are today. Like I started by asking that question, you can't even name 10 names in this country. Can we have hundreds, thousands of them working on various issues, whether it is, working with the disabled, or whether it's working with women or with children or with education or public health or self-help groups or whatever it is. But can we start doing these at scale so that we pull out, millions, if not billions? I mean, look at that staggering statistic of COVID, right? Today, India is producing the largest number of new billionaires. This year, every week we've added a new billionaire to the list of billionaires, dollar billionaires. And there's an Azim Premji report which says that during COVID, 230 million people in this country have slipped below the poverty line. We have to figure out how do we make all the prosperity we are able to make work for the masses. I don't think anybody is so selfish and not going to be worried. I think general humanity is going to be very kind. And I really think that there is no better place in the world to build the best school of development management than India. We have the most complex lab. We have the most complexity of size. We have the intellectual capital. We have increasingly the economic capital. And I would really hope that in some years to come, if some student is sitting, I don't know, in New York saying, I want to study at the best place for development management, he or she should think of colleges in India. That's where I want to go and study. Today, it's the other way, right? I mean, if an Indian student thinking, where do I want to go and study engineering or medicine or management, they're all going off to places like US or Europe. I mean, I think for development management, India has the opportunity to define the way it should go forward. I did start by, being very sort of negative about how we are doing. So I'm just going to share one interesting slide that I've used on occasions, and if I'm able to find that, let me just do that. Yes. You see this slide?
Yeah, we can see.
Look at that map, and you'll find it very interesting because there are names of countries there. That's essentially the population of that state is approximately equal to the population of that country. I mean, this is the size of this country. So you'll have a Rajasthan that has a population of Thailand, or a Kerala that has a population of Canada, and so on and so forth, right? And I want to show you one more slide, and some of you will really value this because you might have been around. In 1947, when we got independence, that we were whatever some 350 million people, it was really a hopeless situation because you were a country that inherited this complex country that the map is showing you, with a literacy of roughly about 8 and 12%, depending on when you look at the data. The life expectancy at birth in 1947 was 23 years. staggering. Poverty was all, I mean, was then mass poverty. 99% of this country was in poverty. We had about 3,000 villages that had electrification. And, mind you, we have some 7 lakh villages in this country. There were 200 kilometers of 4-lane highways, what it is today, hospital beds, onslaught of horrible diseases, and completely culturally, socially demolished by the British rule of, all the years they were here. But I picked up a statistic, and this was a few years ago, but I want to show you what it looked like in 2016. So this population in 1947 brought the country here, and they were, largely illiterate, did not have health, didn't expect to live long, but have taken the country to a place where literacy is at 74%, life expectancy at 68, poverty is down to 22%, 6 lakh villages are electrified, 30,000 kilometers plus of whatever, all these. So my view is that today, 2016 goes to the left side, or 2021 goes to the left side. You now have a really, really educated, healthy, confident population. So my view is that the next, 5, 10 decades is going to be huge, huge progress for India. Besides the fact that there are tectonic shifts happening on the geopolitical spaces, which is going to make up this country. And for that to happen, I believe development management is super, super critical. And that's really where one wants to sort of end. And I know we are at 5:22, and sort of close my talk and say, yeah, we'll build the world's best institution in the country, and we've started that journey. It's very early days. We picked up a lot of very good tailwinds, whether it is money, people, supporters, faculty. We have directors from IIMs coming to teach. I was telling you about the dean of Harvard. So yeah, that's the journey, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that with all of you and being such patient listeners. Really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It's been, in fact, in 40 minutes, so you have really compressed so much into the talk uh, that, for us to take up all those issues would, of course, be impossible. But there may be uh, areas where we might like to know more about the work that's being done. And I would request Father Matthew to start off uh, with his thoughts.
Thank
Yes.
you very much, Professor KCR Raja, for introducing such a wonderful person, Ravi Sreedharan. And you were not only today, but a series of lectures. I was participating, and I found that how powerfully from various disciplines, and especially how the great transformational leaders were brought to you by. So thank you very much, Professor Raja. And yes, sir, Ravi Sreedharan, sir, it was such a fascinating way, and in a very crispy way, within the limited time, you were able to express to us the paradigm shifts you have made. You are into finance, in HSBC as CEO and then head, and you moved to the corporate social responsibility through the present Wipro Foundation, and from there you went to the ground reality of a school, village school, how it's a functioning and developing. And then you have come up with this Indian
Cool.
School of Development Management. And I think that you were passing through different phases, and from the praxis, all of these, I see that it is a practice. And as you have studied the management styles from Ahmedabad and various other places, so you have that theoretical input. So it was so fascinating to listen to the various, the shared expectation, social sector, and the ecosystem, and all those things. So I am coming from the field of science, technology and so quantum mechanics and other things. So I am fascinated with the data. As you know very well, today is the data is free flowing, and then it has also an important role to play. So I see a series of movements from data, gathering information, and from there to knowledge, and from this to the wisdom. And I think this is the core way I have experienced the way how you changed your own phases of life and understanding, and then you have groomed this school of developmental school of management, so that you know how it could be possible to develop the next leadership. So so today also I was asking a person from the marketing who studied in Dubai, and he was telling me that you know maybe around 20 or 30 percentage of what he has studied could only be applied. But I think that from the processes you have undergone and the principles you have derived from all of your vast experiences, so not from theory or doxa, that is what generally say that, but from practice. So how do you see this, you know, this transformation from data to information to knowledge to wisdom? And I think that is ultimately led you to establish this Indian School of Development Management. Could you a little more share about, you know, how these processes of transformation will be able to empower the person, and also this process which will transform our way of uh, yeah, schooling, or you know, gathering experience?
So, thank you, sir. It's obviously a very complex and layered question, and there's so many aspects to it. Like I tell all our students, there are no simple solutions to these problems. Right? It's a complex combination of how do you imagine. But one of the very fundamental things that I believe is that we need to bring values into the whole, aspect of management. That's the starting point for me. Somewhere values are kept as, something you need to do at home, and business is something you do, something else. And that just doesn't seem right at all. But coming to this whole point about what you said, right, from data to information, to knowledge to wisdom, it's interesting because we've been looking at this journey ourselves, and how do we, what does knowledge mean in the development management space, and how, what does it mean? And everything we are doing is from praxis, because the simple advice given to us by S.C. Bihar, who used to be the chief secretary of Madhya Pradesh and very closely involved with our work, is that you learn from the ground and document that, and over time you will see patterns emerging, and from those patterns you then write the knowledge pieces that you will produce. That was the starting point, and that's really what we started with. And that's a very purist way of doing building development management. And we've been doing that for the first 3 years. We did that, but after that we came to a point where people told us, no, that's only, that is not a good idea. You should not reject business management and public administration. You should also learn from them. So as we are building the development management space, on one front we are creating knowledge, which is this whole space, and I talked about that very Puritan way of doing it. The second thing we are doing is we are adapting some of the management principles. We're not rejecting everything. And what we are finding as we are adapting is there are some things that you can take it as it is. So, for example, let's say accounting principles, more or less you can take on an as it is basis. There are some things you need to adapt. So, for example, let's say marketing. The way marketing can play a role in a social sector is obviously not competitive, but it's based on the idea of consumer insights, understanding how people make choices and motivation theory, but using it then to change attitude towards women, towards education, towards caste, towards, whatever it is. And how do you use marketing? So you adapt. And the third really is creating a whole new space. So, for example, let's say, how do you use technology for social good? How do you use data for social good? That's a whole new area. So it's a combination of adopting something as it is, adapting something, and then rejecting and creating it newly for our space. And I like the phrase that you started with, which is a paradigm shift. So the idea of a paradigm shift is you create a new paradigm that challenges the existing paradigm. Rather than go into an existing paradigm and try to change it to suit this place, you go and create a new paradigm. That's a commonly accepted idea now on disruption, which is you don't work within the system, you go outside the system and you create another thing altogether. And that's really what we've tried to do. In terms of how people will go on, like I said, we are seeing ourselves as a catalyst. We don't think that we are going to solve all the problems, but our idea is to catalyze the ecosystem. So can we get more institutions to offer a development management program? So we are a not-for-profit, we are on Creative Commons. So we will give whatever we do to any institution that wants to produce it. So for example, we are writing case studies. We've written some 30 case studies on management in the social sector from India. There are no case studies. I mean, there are case studies of Indian, but written by a Harvard business school. So the whole perspective is missed. And I use that idea of how development management needs to evolve in a developing context, in a developing country context rather than an American context, which is a very westernized idea of development. The idea of development itself is so unique that you have to root it in the context of what you're doing. So we are hoping that we catalyze that whole ecosystem. And in 20 years from now, nobody will have to explain what is this development management. They'll just say, I'm going to study MDM and, it'll go on. If you're able to mainstream it, that's where we've really reached the holy grail of, making a difference. I know I haven't answered your question fully because it is a complex question, but I hope I was able to share
Ye-
some perspective.
Yes. Wonderful answer, sir. And I'm sure that this will be in your head, and then continue to pursue the further. It was fantastic, a profound answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, the students who come for the 1 year program in postgraduate program in development management, would they have had any prior uh, work experience in the sector, the social sector?
Yeah, Professor Raja, what we're finding is that so it's a 1 year program we do. And because it's a 1 year, and the reason we are in a 1 year program is we wanted to stay outside the UGC and the AICT system because we didn't want to go in there and get sucked into their bureaucracy. So we intentionally stayed out. So we've used the ISB model, which is 11-month model. So we don't give a diploma or a degree. We are a certificate program and it's 11. Now, in 11 months, we want to get them to understand perspectives on society, perspectives on development, intervention design, management principles, and the whole impact space. That's a lot to cover in 11 months. Thereby, when we take fresh students, they will struggle because you need to first know the idea of a firm. When I say culture in an organization, you should know what that means. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for me to have a discussion. If I have to start from explaining the concept of culture in a working space, it becomes very difficult. So what we are finding is that students with work ethics are able to cope up with our course much better. Of course, there are some brilliant youngsters, also freshers who come, but that's an exception if you ask me. So most of our students, about 70-80% of our students will come with at least 2 to 4 years of work experience. They've been in unorganized. They would have been in social sector organized. They would have been in IT sector. They would have been in businesses. They would have set up their own enterprises and all that. So that's the profile of students that come. But it's been pushing us to ask the question: do we need to make it a 2 year program eventually? Because if you really want to do justice to the curriculum, we believe this will need to become a 2 year program. In which case, we'll need to get prepared to get accredited by the university system. But for that, you need to create your infrastructure, your so, I mean, we have plans to build a campus and, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, to answer your question, 24, 25 is the median age.
Okay. Yeah, I was also wondering whether 1 year was enough for a
No, it's
program of
not
this
enough, is
kind.
my honest answer,
Because
but
if
that's
you
what
want
we
to
have.
give those students some kind of immersive experience in the field, let's say for 3 months or 4 months or one full term, then and then relate that to the academic component of the program, then of course one might need more than one year.
No, you're absolutely right, Professor Raja. In fact, one of the things that we've tried to introduce as an idea to our students, we tell them that it's 1 year on campus, but we invest.
Hello, hello, someone is.
Yeah,
Can I request everyone to mute himself?
yeah.
Or
Now
should I?
everybody's on mute.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, so I was saying that. we invest heavily in continuing education. So we bring our alums back, we do a lot of programs. But short answer to your question, Professor Rajay, it needs 2 years to do justice to this.
Let me request Gaurang to come in now. Gaurang, please come in. I hope you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, am I unmuted now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I think first of all, I would really like to thank Mr. Sreedharan for a really insightful talk, because I have rarely heard this kind of analysis, sir. Uh, and what struck me was that the emphasis which you put on the role of civil society. And I think that's a very interesting dimension which you gave, because I think that very interesting slide you showed about the achievement of India from 47 to 16, and actually I would like to think that one of the contributors or enablers of this particular miracle, I would say, quote unquote, is that the Indian democratic experiment, and within which the civil society has played a very important role, though it has not been fully understood or fully analyzed. Uh, uh, I cannot resist the temptation of asking you, sir, since I have a person like you here, uh, what would be, according to you, the most unique characteristic of Indian civil society compared to other parts of the world?
Oh, it's so fascinating because I meet a lot of people in civil society, for example, in developed countries like the US and all that. I find that, and maybe it works in the developed countries, so I don't mean to put anybody down. They're very techno-managerial in their cases. Everything is about an incentive. So, for example, to get a COVID vaccination, they will give drugs, weed, as an incentive to do stuff like that. Whereas, in a country like India, some of these value systems that exist, right? Those are very, very powerful. What is the idea of India? So, this whole idea of justice, liberty, fraternity, equality, a very powerful idea. And I think what you said is so true that we created a fabric which was able to nurture civil society movement. So some of the most progressive things that have happened in our country are all from the civil society. Right to information, right to education, watershed movement, Manrega, the self-help groups, microfinance. I can go on.
And sir, our own freedom struggle.
Our freedom struggle was completely, a civil society movement. So what has happened is, unfortunately, over time, the point that you made, people are not recognizing the critical importance of civil society. Somewhere in the buzz of business and power and money, you're forgetting that, society is an important part. There's money doesn't mean anything if there is no society, or the fabric of the society. So this building that aspiration among youngsters to say, I want to be part of civil society rather than I want to be an investment banker or I want to be the next Satya Nadella or whatever it is. That's such a critical. So I say that besides teaching and everything else, can we inspire the brightest youngsters to come and work in the social sector? So when I'm talking to youngsters, I tell them, listen, if you really love solving problems, they think you should go to investment banking. I say that's like 1/100th of the complexity of the problems you will get to solve in the social sector. And guess what? When you solve those problems, it will make so much meaning to your life and career. So I think we need to figure out how do we make civil society an aspirational place. And in many ways, I want to use my marketing abilities and build an iconic institution and make it like, wow, that's the cool place to go. Like everybody says, I want to go to, say, whatever, IIT. I want people to start saying, I want to go into the development sector. And then it's not an easy one, but I think it'll take time. But it will happen. And I think it's a question of creating those hangers, those icons, those pillars around which we can inspire society.
Thank you.
Bharat, I see that you had
Yes, I can see Bharat.
put down your
Yeah,
thoughts.
that's my question. I don't need to say anything more. Yeah, thank you.
It's not affected us, and I say this again that in many ways, I as a person, I've always felt, I've been a beneficiary of an ovarian lottery, having been born into a certain family and all that. And I find even as an NGO, I'm a very privileged person. because I have my IIT, IIM networks, I can, tap into that, and, I'm able to get, all that. So I'm able to put my reporting in place, governance in place, my applications are thorough. I have people to, sort of make sure I have a chartered accountant, I have et cetera, et cetera. So we've not had a problem, to be honest, Bharat sir. But having said that, there is this, and I go back to, what we were just discussing earlier about the importance of civil society. Somewhere there is a view in the, higher echelons of the country that the social sector costs the country somewhere between 1 and 2% of GDP. Now, this is a very dangerous statement, but it's an interesting one, which is there is a belief that the social sector is costing us 1 to 2% of GDP, because I'm not able to create dams, I'm not able to create projects, I'm not able to get the land, I'm not. But you, I mean, do you want to get that land at the expense of society by displacing, millions of people? So, what is this notion of development is becoming a question, and that this is a power equation that always will keep playing, because it's like we are all more familiar with the state and the business. The business will always try to push the state in a certain direction. The state will always try to control the business. And here, because the civil society is actually very weak, it is getting pushed around very easily. There isn't a voice, there isn't a strength, there isn't a professional sort of manner of responding to it. So all these things like, FCRA and, canceling your licenses and putting pressure on who you hire, who do you give money to. These are all pressure tactics that, these are cyclical, but I wouldn't give it too much importance. And if you're in the social sector, you have to recognize that you will have challenges. This is not an easy place. But you're right. A lot of people are very, very are feeling arm twisted and squeezed, and so many organizations have to mind up because the model was based on taking money from abroad and being able to support, many organizations here. Now they can't do that.
Right.
We've been fortunate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any anyone else? We have a
I can
few
see
minutes
two
left,
hands are up.
but if there is anyone who would like to come in, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello,
Yes,
hello.
yes, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Who is it?
This is about yours, Balasubramaniam here.
Yeah, come in, Bala.
Yeah, this is about in your institute. Do you really focus on healthcare for the underprivileged? Having that COVID has blown up a huge dilemma that underprivileged are not getting any kind of the attention that they need. They seem to be neglected.
Yeah. No, Balasubramanian sir. So we primarily work in the intervention design and management of organization space. I don't get into how development can be better, right? So what is better public health, what is better, we don't get into, but I'll give you an example of what we did in the COVID time. We came up with a 3P framework very early when, the villages were wondering, how do you prepare for, how do you isolate if you want it? So we came up, I remember, with a 3P framework, which we rolled out in several, more than 1,000 villages, on how do you prevent, prepare, and protect yourself. So, and that framework was around, it's really a systems thinking idea. How do you get the community to prepare for itself? How does a village, like, for example, my community here or your community in Bangalore would have prepared yourself to prevent the coming of COVID and to protect yourself if it happens? What does a villager do? So we actually worked a whole model of, if you had to prevent it, how do you create a mask? Now, to create a mask, I can't pay money to buy the mask. I have to create a 3-layer using my dupatta, my turban, whatever. So we did create some management frameworks on how a village, and we rolled it out through the local NGO partners we have across the country. I don't work in public health directly, but I work in
Yeah.
management of organizations working in public health and how do you design intervention. And the objective is eventually what you just said. How do you make sure public health works for the poorest of the poor? How does public education work for the poorest of the poor? How does food security work for the poorest, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Okay, I see one more raised hand, Padmini.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a funny question. Why, how much would you factor in the aspect of jugaad? In India, everything works on jugaad. And we seem to be more successful with Jugaad than with real mainline development.
Yeah, in fact, there is one course we run, ma'am, in our program. It's taught by the director of IIM Bangalore, Professor Rishikesh, and it's based on a book he's written, From Jugaad to Systemic Innovations. And that's so true. You know, Jugaad in some ways is a bit of an innovative mind in terms of how it is done, except that sometimes it loses out some of the value system that should go with it. And the second is it's not a repeatable thing that, you know, how do you teach Jugaad? You can't teach Jugaad. So, but this inherent entrepreneurial nature of, you know, most of us who've grown up in this complex society that we live in is a very powerful aspect of leading and managing organizations. So like I said, we do have a course on, you know, from Jugaad to systemic innovations. So it isn't a funny question. It is a very important question in terms of figuring out how do we make what is indigenous to our country work in the management of our organizations. That's such an important aspect.
Okay. Um, should I come back to Gaurang and Father Matthew? Anything you would like to add?
Father Matthew, you're on mute.
You muted yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, sir.
yeah.
So, sir, you were speaking about this value system, inculcating the value system. See, we through Mahatma Gandhi and the others, you know, we have really inculcated a new value system when we have received independence and all, you know, sacrificing, giving oneself for the other. So that is why even our rupee notes will have, because of his personality and the contributions he had made. But today we see that, you know, more of that selfishness and profit motive and the other things. So maybe taking from the clue from two philosophers which were Germans. One is Kant, Immanuel Kant, and another um, is again after one. But so I forgot actually his name. So what processes they have taken is, Immanuel Kant was simply saying that, you know, the categorical imperative, that, you know, what I say you follow. So in that way, but the other person is proposing that, you know, by involving oneself into the whole processes of the society, you are becoming ethical, you are becoming moral. So so these two different ways of, and I think Mahatma Gandhi was following maybe by involving the society and also to some extent these principles. So how do you feel that, you know, today everybody wants to make money, to be profit oriented, and even in the corporate also we are finding it the same way. So how do you change these systems and inculcate that value system into the younger generation?
You know that it's such a critical thing, right? It's a system that's at play. And you know, one of the things that, for example, Harsh Mandar comes and teaches in our institution, and one of the things he says is, try and remember when you, I mean, in our case, you know, when you were a small child and you saw a beggar at a traffic signal, what did your mother and father tell you? It's amazing. From the time we have a small child, we'll tell the child to look away. No, 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 no. You know, these are whatever. You'll find some way to desensitize them. Human beings are naturally very sensitive. You know, you're born sensitive. If you have two babies lying next to each other, and if one baby cries, guaranteed the other baby will cry. Whereas what we do is we systematically desensitize our own children. And then once you go into the school, it gets desensitized even further. You know, it becomes about personal greed versus collective good. You know, I go to the class, I come, classic, right? I get a second rank, I come home. What will my father say? You know, why didn't you come first, right? So it's that competitive mindset. It's not about the collective good. And that has just gone to another level altogether, Professor Matthew. You know, this desensitizing ourselves, you know, while I think that our population, dynamics is occurs. I think this desensitization of ourselves over time. I mean, today, if two people die, it doesn't make news. I mean, really, the value of life is gone. Unless, many hundred people, something happened, we don't even get up to read the news column on that, sir. We become very desensitized, Matthew, sir. And that's
Yes.
something I don't know how we have to get them
Yeah,
out. That's a very systemic issue.
yeah, yes, sir. Continuing with that, that Kant and Hegel, these were the two the principles they were generating, and maybe as you are saying that desensitizing, maybe I think conditioning.
Conditioning, correct?
Yeah, and how our educational system is conditioning the next generation, and maybe a new culture which you are also speaking. So how to inculcate the new culture, and I think it is in that process you have made the school of development management to sensitize or to condition in a different perspective, which I said that I have kind of a paradigm shift. Maybe even in the universities where we have this MBA and or even from BBA, I think your the results which you have um, experienced and made into principles. So this we need to diffuse. So what way you will be able to diffuse such into this new management schools, so that we can create a new culture and maybe a new civilization?
One of the simple things we do. So I also think, for example, education has become the new caste system. You know, if you're not educated, you can't be with me is the new caste system, as I call it. But if I what one of the things we do is in a typical traditional university system, sir, once 60 students come into the class, as far as the faculty is concerned, all 60 are the same. That's the traditional model, and that is a very industrial model, if you ask me. Whereas every student in that class has a context which is very rich. The girl who's come in with her aspirations, the boy who's come in with some, poverty challenges, the transgender who's come in trying to find her identity. There are so many identities in that. So one of the things, for example, we do is we say that this journey is not about whatever 60 people moving from A to Z. It's about one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, each individual having their own journeys. So we've created a concept called the bricolier. Bricolier is a French word where there's one person attached to every 20 students who helps the student in that student's learning journey. So if somebody moves from 95 to 98 and somebody else moves from 10 to 50, for me, the 10 to 50 is a better student than the 95 to 98 student, and thereby valuing the context of each other. So we do a context presentation. So in the beginning, every student will do a context presentation. So when this Brahmin girl from Chennai listens to this Nagaland girl who says, I eat pork for breakfast, but they're roommates back in the hostel, it changes the attitude completely. Oh my God, there can be so nice people from so many diverse, backgrounds and whatever. So that whole sensitizing starts. I mean, it should start in school, it should start in families, and it's not about moral science classes. That's the other myth that we have. Oh, we need to teach values. No, it's a whole system you have to create for value.
Thank you very much, sir.
Wonderful. Uh, I must, we can go on and on, but I must resist the temptation. It's not fair to you or to anyone else.
Such
Yeah.
a pleasure to be
I,
with all of you.
I have only one question. Our number may be small, but I'm sure there must be in all of us, as there is in me, a very strong urge to continue this engagement with you and to see before us the development of the leaders of tomorrow in the social sector. How do we do that?
One of the things that I always talk, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that, is I'm always looking, for what I call intellectual capital, social capital, and economic capital. And I'll tell you, the economic capital is the easy one. The social capital that all of you bring, the intellectual capital that all of you bring, I will value immensely. If any one of you says, listen, I'm willing to give my time, I'm willing to, whatever, make my social capital work for you, my experience. Your paper, by the way, Professor Raja, is a gem of a piece of paper that I've read. To say that somebody has thought of this 30 years ago, you may have been way ahead of your time, but those are, bring a lot of humility to us, saying, you're not the first person trying to figure out. You're just in the continuum, you've come in at a certain point, and that's how I see ourselves.
No,
And
that is
I
not the
know,
point that I wanted to make.
no, what
Uh,
I want to say is that
yeah,
there is a lot of intellectual capital that
yeah, yeah,
exists
yeah,
in
that's
this
true.
group.
Yeah,
There's a lot of social capital that exists in this
yes,
group.
yeah. In
And
fact, quite, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I would really like to figure out how can one capture that,
Yes,
whether it means writing about ideas you have, whether it is about case
yes,
studies that you have, whether it is
yes,
about just listening and recording things that you've
yes,
sort of done in your life.
yes.
These are all things I'd be very interested in.
There are people here, quite a few of us are retired, and we have perhaps time for this. And we were wondering how we could get involved in some activity or the other. For instance, if you have the basic raw material, which is brought by the students from their experience in fieldwork, helping them to convert it into a case
Hmm.
where the learning outcome can be, uh, sort of designed, and it can be put in the form of a case.
Yeah,
Uh, that's one thing which can be done,
absolutely.
and there are others. Well, to be able to contribute in some way or the other, which I'm sure all of most of us will be able to. You will have to study us and find out what contribution we can make. We may not be able to do exactly what you have in mind to
Yeah.
to
No,
bring out
Professor
such
Raja,
solutions.
even by calling me to give this talk, for example, it's a
Yes,
huge contribution because somebody you may know who is interested in this space, maybe it was a student of yours many years ago, or your grandchild who wants to go into this space, and you just introduce us to people like that. So many things that we need to do. So I would not underestimate the value that one can get from every individual on the screen today, Raja. Absolutely. So just having planted this idea into all of you, the ideas that we talked about, the institution that we talked about, I'm sure naturally also it will come. And any idea that, and I can put my, or you can share my email address and phone number with anyone. I'd be delighted to, talk, hear, get connected. Like I said, it's collective wisdom for me that I work on.
wonderful,
So
wonderful. So if I have to bother you with some more requests for talks, that would be okay.
I'll be more than happy.
Okay, right.
I'll be so happy, I can't tell you. In fact, one of the things I'm very proud of is two of my students have gone on to set up two separate NGOs whose objective is the well-being of aged people, senior citizens.
Yes.
And they're
The
doing
other thing,
amazing work. And I must,
yeah. The other thing which we were thinking of was even persons like Gaurang who's sitting here, uh, some kind of mentorship for boys who are setting up uh,
yes,
NGOs, or
yes,
getting involved in some way or the other. Of
yes.
course, in a purely honorary capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, for example, in Bangalore itself, I have so many students. I'm sure some of them would, love to listen to you and hear your experiences and your journeys.
I'd like to take this forward
Surely,
on behalf of all of us here and
surely.
others who might join us. Yeah.
No, no,
Thank,
surely, absolutely.
thank you. Thank you very much indeed. May I now request, it's almost 6 o'clock, may I
I
request
know.
Mr. Natarajan to formally propose a vote of thanks. Mr. Natarajan, please come in.
Uh,
Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, we can hear you now.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Natarajan, and I was so thrilled to hear whatever you said, because many of those things have been running in my own mind. I'm sure your entire audience must also be similarly influenced by what you are saying. And in such simple terms, in such a short while, you were able to communicate so much, and you almost putting the blueprint of your institution within this short period. And that's why Ms. Raja now says that we also want to contribute to it. So
you've been a great marketing person, perhaps unbeknown to yourself. That was your career, but I think you have carried on that great aspect of your personality, and we are very grateful to you for whatever you said. I don't want to repeat all the things in a nutshell or anything, because that has been already done beautifully by Father Matthew, the outgoing director of ECC. And in future, we would like to hear you again and again. And thanks a million. It was a very, very valuable. When I saw the topic, I was a bit confused. What exactly is he trying to say? Is he challenging the social sector? What is it? Or does he say that management cannot be applied? But your lecture was a very illuminating one. We were highly thrilled to listen to it, and we absorbed a little bit of it, but it will take a few weeks for us to realize the full impact of what you have been saying in this short duration of 40 minutes. Thank you very much. God bless you. And please come again.
Really, thank you so much.
Yeah, that last sentence, please come again.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to
Really
repeat.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Good night,
It's
everybody.
been a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
On that note, let me bring it to an end.